My ex-wife cheated, sued me, and then lost it all. I never thought I'd be one of those guys telling a story like this, but here I am, typing it out because I need to get this off my chest. So this past weekend, my wife Hannah, 38F, and our daughter Lily, 13F, went out of town to visit her mom, Carol, for a girls' weekend. I couldn't go because I couldn't get the time off work. I'm a firefighter in a busy city down south, and getting time off isn't always easy. We figured it would be good for them to have a little time together anyway, so it didn't seem like a big deal. Now here's where things go off the rails. Saturday night, I'm at work, and we get a call about some minor fire at a strip mall. No big deal. We're getting our gear ready to head out when my phone starts buzzing in my pocket. I usually ignore my personal phone when I'm on the clock, but for some reason, I decided to check it. Maybe because it was late, maybe because I just had a bad feeling. I don't know. Anyway, I pull out my phone, and I've got like 6 missed texts from Lily and a couple from a number I didn't recognize. I scroll through the messages, and I see that Lily's in the hospital. She had gone ice skating with her friends, took a bad fall, and broke her wrist. My heart sank. There's nothing worse than your kid being hurt and you not being there. But what really messed me up was that Lily couldn't get treatment yet because they couldn't find Hannah. The texts from the unknown number, turns out they were from Beth, one of Hannah's friends. Beth had been with Lily at the hospital. She says she's been trying to reach Hannah too, but no luck. No calls, no texts, no nothing. I'm thinking, where the hell is she? Our daughter's in the ER and my wife is nowhere to be found. So I start freaking out, thinking maybe something happened to her too. Then I check our family's location sharing app. You know, the one where you can see where your family members are at all times. Hannah and I had set it up mostly for safety reasons, since we're not always together with my work and her visiting family all the time. I pull up her location, and sure enough, it shows she's not at her mom's place. She's not even anywhere near the hospital. She's at a hotel. At this point, I'm standing there in the firehouse, staring at my phone like I just got hit in the face. I'm looking at the screen, looking at the clock. It's been hours since Lily went to the hospital. Hours. And Hannah's chilling at some hotel like nothing's happening. I'm pissed. No, scratch that. I'm furious. But I still try to stay calm because I need to make sure Lily's okay first. I called Beth, and thank God she picked up. She tells me Lily is doing all right, but they can't do anything without the insurance info, which only Hannah has. And the whole time, I'm sitting there trying to process how my wife can just disappear while our daughter's sitting in the ER with a broken wrist. So, I asked Beth if she had any idea where Hannah was. That's when she hesitates. You know when someone's about to drop something on you, and you can feel it coming? That was this moment. Beth says, I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but Hannah's out with some guy. She went to dinner with him earlier, and I haven't heard from her since. I swear, I had to sit down because it felt like someone punched me in the gut. My wife's out with another dude while our daughter's in the hospital? Are you kidding me? I didn't know what to say. I just kind of sat there feeling like a complete idiot. Here I am, busting my ass every day as a firefighter, working overtime to pay for everything. The house, the vacations, Lily's private school, all of it. And meanwhile, Hannah's out having a great time with some random guy. I couldn't even wrap my head around it. I wanted to blow up her phone, but she wasn't answering my calls or texts. The only person she bothered to call was Lily, and that was after hours of radio silence. She didn't even try to come back to the hospital. Beth ended up taking Lily back to her grandmother's after she finally got a cast on her arm. The worst part? Beth sends me this text after dropping Lily off, and I'll never forget it. She said, I'm sorry you had to find out this way about Alex. I thought you knew. About Alex? Who the hell is Alex? I didn't know anything about some Alex. Apparently this guy had been in the picture for a while. Beth said this wasn't the first time Hannah had snuck off to see him whenever she went back to visit her mom. Every time I couldn't go with them, she'd meet up with him. It's like I'd been working all these extra hours thinking I was giving them the life they deserved, and meanwhile, Hannah's been sneaking off with this dude behind my back. I felt like the biggest fool on the planet. By the time my shift ended, I didn't even want to go home. I drove around for a while just trying to think about what the hell I was supposed to do next. I kept replaying everything in my head. Every argument, every time she went to visit her mom without me. All those moments I didn't think twice about now seem so obvious. But the reality is I didn't want to see it. Who wants to think their wife is cheating on them while they're busting their ass to keep the family together? When I finally got home, the house felt empty. All the pictures of us smiling, all the plans we made, it felt like a lie. I sat there in the living room, staring at my phone, still no response from Hannah. I knew one thing for sure. Things were about to get ugly. I wasn't going to sit around and pretend everything was fine. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who just lets it happen. I had to talk to her, and I had to do it face to face. But I already knew, deep down, this wasn't something we could fix. I barely slept that night. I don't know if it was the anger, the betrayal, or the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about how messed up everything had gotten in just one weekend. All I knew was that I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront Hannah. I woke up early the next morning staring at my phone, hoping she'd at least send me some lame excuse, but nope, nothing. It was like she didn't even care. I wasn't going to sit there and keep waiting for her to magically come clean. So I grabbed my keys and drove over to Carol's house, where Hannah had been staying with Lily. I didn't care if it was awkward or if Carol was there. I needed answers. When I pulled up to Carol's house, I saw Lily's bike outside, which gave me a little relief. At least she was back safe. But then I noticed Hannah's car parked a few houses down, like she didn't want anyone to know she was there. That just set me off even more. If she wanted to play games, fine, but I wasn't going to tiptoe around this anymore. I knocked on the door and Carol answered. She looked surprised, probably because she wasn't expecting me to show up unannounced. "Oh, hey, Mark," she said, with that awkward smile people do when they know something's wrong but don't want to get involved. "Where's Hannah?" I asked straight up, not interested in small talk. Carol hesitated for a second and then motioned for me to come inside. "She's upstairs with Lily," she said quietly, like she didn't want to be part of whatever was about to go down. I didn't blame her. I marched upstairs, and as soon as I got to the door of the guest room, I heard voices. Lily was talking to Hannah about her wrist, and it sounded like everything was perfectly normal. That pissed me off even more. I opened the door and both of them looked at me, surprised. Lily smiled and said, "Hey, Dad," like everything was fine. But Hannah, she just froze. She knew why I was there. I tried to keep it together for Lily's sake. "Hey, sweetie, how's your wrist?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "It's okay, it still hurts a bit, but the cast helps," she said, showing off the bright pink cast she'd picked out. I smiled, but my heart wasn't in it. My mind was on Hannah. "Can I talk to your mom alone for a minute?" I asked Lily. She didn't seem to pick up on the tension and nodded, heading downstairs. As soon as she was gone, I shut the door and turned to Hannah. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low but firm. "You disappear while our daughter's in the ER, and I know about the hotel, Hannah." Hannah's face turned pale and she looked down at her hands like a kid who just got caught stealing candy. "Mark, I'm sorry," she started, but I cut her off. "Sorry? That's all you've got? You're sorry?" My voice was starting to shake from anger, but I tried to stay calm. "Who's Alex, and how long has this been going on?" She bit her lip and wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's not what you think." "Bullshit," I snapped. "I know exactly what it is. You've been sneaking around with him every time you come here without me, so don't even try to play dumb." That's when she finally broke. "Okay, yes, I've been seeing Alex, but it's complicated, Mark. I didn't plan for this to happen." I laughed, but it wasn't because it was funny. "Complicated? You were screwing another guy while I was working overtime to pay for this family. What's complicated about that?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. She needed to hear it. "How long?" I demanded again. "Tell me the truth." "A few months," she said quietly, still not looking at me. "A few months?" I could feel the rage boiling up inside me. "So while I'm working 60-hour weeks, thinking everything's fine, you're off having an affair?" She finally looked up, her eyes filled with guilt, but I wasn't about to let her play the victim. "I didn't want it to be like this, Mark. I wasn't happy, okay? You're always at work, and when you're home, you're exhausted. I needed something else." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So instead of talking to me, you just decided to cheat. You decided to blow up our entire family because you needed something else." She started crying then, but it didn't make me feel any better. I'd seen her cry before, and it always worked in the past. But this time, I wasn't falling for it. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she sobbed. "I thought maybe it was just a phase, but what? It wasn't a phase, was it? You were going to keep sneaking around until you got caught, right?" She didn't answer. That's when I knew I was right. She never planned on telling me. If Lily hadn't broken her wrist, if Beth hadn't told me, I'd still be in the dark. "So what now?" I asked, my voice flat. "You think we can just pretend like this didn't happen? You think I'm just going to let this slide?" Hannah wiped her eyes and shook her head. "I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose you. I don't want to break up our family." I stared at her, not believing what I was hearing. "Hannah, you already broke it. There's nothing left to save." For a moment, she looked like she was going to argue, but then she just nodded, defeated. "What do we do now?" she whispered. I sighed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and anger. "We get a divorce. That's what we do." Her eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious," I interrupted. "I'm not going to stay married to someone who cheats on me and doesn't even have the decency to own up to it. I'll talk to a lawyer. We'll figure it out." Hannah sat there, stunned, as I turned and left the room. I didn't want to look at her anymore. The person I thought I knew, the person I thought I could trust, was gone. I went downstairs, and Lily was sitting at the kitchen table with Carol, eating a bowl of cereal like nothing was wrong. I smiled at her, trying to hide the storm brewing inside me. I knew I had to keep it together for her sake. Whatever was coming next, I had to be strong for her. Update 1. After leaving Carol's house, I drove around for what felt like hours. I didn't know where I was going or what I was supposed to do next. My mind was racing, thinking about everything Hannah had said. I kept hearing her excuses over and over in my head. I wasn't happy. Like that made it okay. Like that somehow gave her permission to ruin everything we built together. When I finally got home, I just sat in my car for a minute, staring at the house. It was weird. This place that used to feel like home suddenly felt wrong, like I didn't belong there anymore. I eventually forced myself to go inside, but the silence hit me like a ton of bricks. Normally, I'd come home to Lily laughing, Hannah asking how my day was, the sounds of our family. Now, all I had was quiet. I knew I had to start thinking about the next steps. This wasn't just about me anymore. Lily was caught in the middle, and I had to do whatever it took to protect her. That meant talking to a lawyer. I hated the idea of dragging this mess into court, but I wasn't going to let Hannah take advantage of me anymore. If she wanted out, fine, but she wasn't getting everything. The next morning, I called a divorce lawyer. It felt like a punch to the gut just making that call, but I knew it had to be done. I set up a consultation for later that week. In the meantime, I still had to figure out how to talk to Lily. That was the hardest part. She didn't deserve any of this, and I wasn't sure how to explain it to her without breaking her heart. 2 days later, I picked Lily up from school. I had been dreading this conversation, but I couldn't avoid it forever. We drove in silence for a bit, and I kept glancing at her, trying to figure out the right words to say. How do you tell your kid that their mom's been lying to them? That their family's falling apart? Finally, I just went for it. "Hey Lil, can we talk for a minute?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. She shrugged. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath. "You know how things have been a little weird lately? With me and your mom?" She didn't say anything at first, but I could see the gears turning in her head. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I noticed." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "Well, the thing is, your mom and I aren't going to be together anymore. We're getting a divorce." I heard her take a sharp breath, and I braced myself for the questions. But all she said was, "Is it because of that guy?" That hit me like a freight train. She knew. Somehow she already knew. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to stay calm. But my heart was pounding. Lily shifted in her seat, looking down at her hands. "I saw her with him. When we were at Grandma's. They didn't think I noticed, but I saw them hugging and she kissed him." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the car. My 13-year-old daughter had to witness that, and I didn't even know. I didn't think it was possible to be more angry at Hannah, but in that moment, I was boiling. I could barely keep it together. "I'm so sorry, Lily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You shouldn't have had to see that. None of this is your fault, okay?" She nodded, but I could see the tears in her eyes. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked, her voice small and scared. That question just about broke me. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Yeah, kiddo, we're going to be okay, I promise." A few days later, I had my meeting with the lawyer. I walked into her office feeling like a deer in headlights. I'd never been through anything like this before, and the whole thing just felt so unreal. Like, was this seriously happening? Was I really about to start a divorce? The lawyer, Michelle, was sharp. She didn't mess around and got straight to the point. "So, Mark, I understand you're looking to file for divorce. Tell me what's been going on." I didn't hold back. I told her everything. How I found out about Hannah's affair, how she'd been seeing this Alex guy for months behind my back, how she wasn't even there when Lily needed her at the hospital. Michelle listened quietly, nodding as I went on. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Well, it sounds like you've got a pretty solid case," she said. "The fact that she's been unfaithful could work in your favor, especially when it comes to custody." That word, custody, hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't even really thought about it until then. This wasn't just about splitting up our stuff and going our separate ways. This was about Lily, my daughter, the person I loved more than anything in the world. What do you think my chances are? I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Michelle gave me a reassuring smile. Based on what you've told me, I think you have a good shot at getting primary custody. You're the stable parent here. You've been the one working, providing for the family, and Hannah's actions show that she's not exactly putting your daughter's best interests first. I nodded, feeling a small wave of relief. What about the house, the bills? How's that going to work? She laid it all out for me. How we'd have to divide everything, how I'd probably have to pay Hannah some spousal support for a while, but that we could negotiate the terms. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was doable. As I left her office, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness. It was all swirling around in my head. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Hannah walk all over me anymore. I was going to fight for my daughter, and I wasn't going to let her destroy what was left of our lives. That weekend, Hannah finally came to pick up her things from the house. I had been dreading it all week, but it had to happen sooner or later. She pulled into the driveway with Alex. Of course, she didn't even have the decency to come alone. I stood by the door as they got out of the car, trying to keep my cool. Lily was with her friend, thank God, so she didn't have to see this. Hannah barely looked at me as she walked past, heading straight for the bedroom to pack up her stuff. Alex stood awkwardly by the car, not sure what to do with himself. I didn't care enough to acknowledge him. As she packed, I could feel the tension building in the house. I wanted to scream at her, tell her how much she had hurt me. But what was the point? She wasn't the person I thought she was anymore. When she finally came downstairs, bags in hand, she looked at me for the first time. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I stared at her for a moment, then shook my head. "No, you're not." And with that, she left. Just like that, years of marriage, of building a life together, were over. Update 2. So the day finally came. I didn't expect it to happen so fast, but Hannah had filed for spousal support and we were headed to court. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I also wasn't going to roll over and let her take everything. She had already packed up her stuff and moved in with Alex, but apparently that wasn't enough. Now she wanted money. My money. The same money I'd been working overtime to make while she was off sneaking around behind my back. I wasn't having it. The morning of the court hearing, I woke up feeling anxious as hell. I kept going over everything in my head, trying to remember what the lawyer had told me to do, what documents I needed to bring. I had spent the night before printing out bank statements, bills, text messages, anything that would show I wasn't some deadbeat. I got to the courthouse early. The place was buzzing with people, mostly other couples fighting over who got what, and you could feel the tension in the air. I waited outside the courtroom for what felt like forever, just sitting there, going over my stack of paperwork. Then Hannah showed up. She walked in like she owned the place, Alex trailing behind her. He didn't come into the courtroom, thank God, but just knowing he was there put me on edge. It took everything in me not to say something, but I bit my tongue. Today was about getting this done the right way. Not for her, not for Alex, but for Lily. Hannah didn't even look at me. She just sat down on the opposite side of the room, scrolling through her phone like none of this even mattered. It was like she wasn't even taking this seriously. Then the judge walked in, and it was time to get down to business. The first part of the hearing was just going over the basics. Our names, dates of birth, when we got married, all that stuff. I zoned out for most of it, just staring at the judge, trying to figure out if they were the type to side with me or if I was about to get screwed. Finally, the judge got to the spousal support part. "So, Mrs. Hart," the judge said, looking at Hannah, "you're asking for monthly support payments?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied, in the fakest, sweetest voice I've ever heard. It was like she'd been practicing her poor me act in front of a mirror. "And can you explain why you believe you're entitled to spousal support?" Hannah took a deep breath, like she was about to give the performance of her life. "Well, Your Honor, I've been a stay-at-home mom for most of our marriage. Mark has been the one working while I took care of our daughter and managed the household. Now that we're separated, I don't have an income, and I need help to get back on my feet." I almost laughed out loud. Managed the household? The only thing she managed was sneaking around with Alex and making sure I was working hard enough to pay for her little vacations. But I kept my mouth shut. The judge nodded, writing down notes, and then looked at me. "Mr. Hart, do you have anything to add?" This was it, my chance to finally lay it all out. I pulled out the stack of papers I had printed and handed it to the judge. "Your Honor, I've been the sole provider for my family for years, yes, But my wife hasn't exactly been the stay-at-home mother she's making herself out to be. While I was working overtime, she was carrying on an affair. I have evidence here that shows she was spending money on hotels and restaurants, and I believe that should be taken into account when considering her request for spousal support. The judge looked through the papers, flipping through the highlighted transactions, and I could see them nodding slightly. Hannah squirmed in her seat but didn't say anything. Furthermore, I continued, I've been paying for everything. The mortgage, the utilities, Lily's school fees, even the groceries. I'm not refusing to help her. But I don't think it's fair for her to get spousal support on top of what I've already been doing when she's the one who chose to leave. I could see Hannah's lawyer whispering in her ear, probably trying to come up with some kind of defense. But it was too late. The judge looked back at her. Mrs. Hart, do you have a response? Hannah stammered for a second before saying, Your Honor, the affair is irrelevant. We're here to discuss the financial situation, and I still need support to maintain my standard of living. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She thought she deserved the same standard of living she had while we were married, while she was living with Alex. It was like I was living in some alternate reality. The judge shook their head. The affair may not be relevant to the financial situation directly, but it does speak to the circumstances of your separation. I'll take everything into consideration and make my decision shortly. The courtroom was silent as the judge looked over the documents, and I could feel my heart racing. This was it. Whatever the judge decided would shape the rest of my life, financially at least. I glanced over at Hannah, who was still scrolling through her phone like she couldn't care less. That's when I realized that no matter what the judge said, I had already won in a way. She didn't care about us, about me, or even Lily. Not really. She was only in it for herself. Finally, the judge spoke. Mr. Hart, given your role as the primary provider and the circumstances surrounding the separation, I'm going to deny Mrs. Hart's request for ongoing spousal support. Hannah's face dropped. I could see her mouth open slightly like she was about to protest, but she didn't. The judge wasn't done yet. However, the judge continued, I will order a one-time payment to assist Mrs. Hart with transitional expenses. But beyond that, both parties will be responsible for their own financial futures. I felt this massive weight lift off my shoulders. A one-time payment I could handle. Ongoing support? No way. The judge signed the paperwork, and just like that, it was done. After the hearing, Hannah didn't say a word to me. She just stormed out of the courtroom with her lawyer, probably going to complain about how unfair everything was. I didn't care. I had done what I needed to do. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I could finally breathe again. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. I wasn't going to let her keep taking from me after everything she'd done. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. As I got into my car and drove away, I realized this was the first step toward getting my life back. It wasn't going to be easy, and there was still a long road ahead, but at least I wasn't stuck in that toxic mess anymore. I had Lily, and that was all that mattered. Update 3. The days after the court hearing were kind of a blur. For the first time in a while, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next fight with Hannah, the next argument about money, or whatever else she could throw at me. It felt weird, like there was this big space in my life now, but at the same time, I could finally breathe again. Lily seemed to pick up on the shift too. She wasn't asking about her mom as much, and when we were together, it felt easier, like a weight had been lifted for both of us. That was all I really cared about, making sure she was okay through all of this. A week or so after the court hearing, I got a text from Hannah. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the best of me. It was short. Can we talk about Lily? I stared at the screen for a minute. Of course, she didn't want to talk about anything else. Not the affair, not how she screwed up our family, just about Lily. Like that was going to magically fix everything. I took a deep breath and replied, What do you want to talk about? Her response came almost immediately. I want to see her. She's my daughter too. I knew this was coming, but it still pissed me off. She hadn't even tried to reach out to Lily since the whole mess started, and now, all of a sudden, she wanted to play the concerned mom. I thought about ignoring her, but I couldn't do that. As much as I hated Hannah for what she did, Lily deserved to have a relationship with her mom, at least if that's what she wanted. I texted back, I'll talk to Lily and see how she feels about it. That was the end of the conversation, for now. I didn't want to deal with it, but I had to. After all, this wasn't about me. It was about what was best for Lily, and even though I wanted to protect her from everything, I knew she had the right to decide for herself. That evening, I sat down with Lily after dinner. We were watching one of those true crime shows she's weirdly obsessed with, and I figured now was as good a time as any to bring it up. "Hey, Lil," I said, turning the volume down. She looked over at me, raising an eyebrow like she knew something serious was coming. "Your mom texted me today. She said she wants to see you." Lily didn't say anything at first, just stared at the TV like she was trying to avoid the conversation. I gave her a minute, not wanting to push her. "Do you want to see her?" I finally asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could. She shrugged. "I don't know." I could see the conflict in her eyes. On one hand, Hannah was still her mom. No matter what she did, that bond was hard to break. But on the other hand, Lily had seen a lot of what had gone down. She wasn't blind to the fact that her mom had betrayed our family. "I get it," I said. "It's a tough situation, but you don't have to make a decision right now. If you want to see her, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. It's up to you." Lily nodded, but she still didn't look at me. "What if she just does it again?" she asked quietly. My heart broke a little hearing her say that. No kid should have to worry about their parents screwing them over again. But I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't promise her that Hannah wouldn't let her down again, because honestly, I didn't know. "I don't know, Lil," I said, being as honest as I could. "But if she does, I'll be here. Always. I'll never let you down." That seemed to be enough for her. She nodded again, and we went back to watching our show. But I knew that conversation wasn't over. It would come up again, probably sooner than later. I just had to be ready when it did. A few days later, I got another text from Hannah, this time asking when she could see Lily. She wasn't messing around. I told her to hold on while I talked to Lily again. "Mom wants to see you," I told Lily, trying to sound casual, like it wasn't a big deal, even though it felt like one. Lily thought about it for a minute and finally said, "I guess I can see her, but I don't want to go alone." I wasn't expecting that, but it made sense. "Okay, we can do that. I'll be there too. We'll meet somewhere public just to make it easier." Lily nodded, and that was that. I texted Hannah and set up a time for us to meet at a park in town. I figured it was neutral ground and a good place for Lily to feel safe. Plus, it was public enough that if things went sideways, we could leave without a scene. The day of the meeting, Lily was quiet, and I could tell she was nervous. I didn't blame her. I was nervous too. I didn't know how this was going to go, and part of me was dreading the whole thing. But I put on a brave face for Lily. We got to the park a little early, and I let her wander off to the swings while I waited for Hannah to show up. I spotted her car pulling into the parking lot a few minutes later, and my stomach tightened. She got out, looking like she had tried a little too hard to look normal, but it didn't fool me. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept adjusting her jacket. She walked over, and I waved her over to the bench where I was sitting. I could see her scanning the park for Lily, and when she spotted her on the swings, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hi," she said awkwardly, sitting down next to me. "Hey," I replied, not really wanting to make small talk. There was an awkward silence for a minute before she finally asked, "How is she?" I shrugged. "She's fine. She's strong." Hannah nodded, biting her lip like she didn't know what to say. After another minute of silence, she asked, "Do you think she'll want to talk to me?" I looked over at Lily, who was still swinging, her face focused but calm. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but she's here. That's a start." Hannah looked over at Lily too, and for a split second, I could see real sadness in her eyes. Maybe she regretted everything. Maybe she was just sad she got caught. I wasn't sure, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. What mattered was Lily. After a few more minutes of awkward small talk, I called out to Lily. "You ready to come talk?" She got off the swing and walked over slowly, like she was testing the waters. I could see Hannah light up as she got closer, but Lily kept her distance. "Hi, sweetie," Hannah said softly. "I've missed you so much." Lily just nodded. "Hi, Mom." The rest of the conversation was short and to the point. Lily didn't say much, but she didn't seem angry either. Just distant. I guess that's the best way to describe it. She wasn't ready to forgive, but she wasn't shutting her out completely either. When it was over, we said our goodbyes, and as I watched Hannah walk back to her car, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. It was like I had finally let go of all the baggage. We drove home in silence, but this time it wasn't the heavy kind of silence. It felt lighter, like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay after all.